So, hi everyone. So, now we're live on YouTube temporarily. So, good evening everyone. Good evening Niner. Good evening IFNG. So, good evening Sir Mr. M, Sir Jeff, and Sir Lode. So, tonight we will talking about the subtest in writing in Toefl. So, now Sir Lode, take it away.
All right. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second part of our test talk series. So, the first time that IFNG invited me, we were talking about the differences between the speaking section of the TOEFL and the IELTS for this, let's call it episode, but I would say part. For this part of our test talk series, we're going to talk about the difference between the IELTS writing section and the TOEFL writing section. So, for those who are meeting me for the first time, I would like to invite you guys to join our TOEFL Study Group Philippines. This is our study group on Facebook, which we created for the sake of students who can't seem to find resources for the TOEFL. Especially in the Philippines, there's very limited places where you can get information about the TOEFL. And we created this group so we can build a community of people that can interact with one another, share vital information and resources that will help each person in the group to get a good score in the TOEFL exam. So we encourage you to join this group. Again, it's TOEFL Study Group Philippines. And if you cannot find us, simply type TOEFL Philippines in the search engine of your Facebook account, and I'm sure that our group will show up. By the way, my name is Lone. I'm one of the IELTS lecturers and coaches of 9.09er IELTS Review Center, the number one review center in the Philippines when it comes to English test preparation. But on top of my role as an IELTS coach and an IELTS lecturer, I'm actually also the head of the TOEFL program of our center. So I've taken both exams, and that's why I am confident to talk about both of them. So I took the IELTS in 2015. I took the TOEFL in 2017. And on top of that, I have other trainings and other activities that allow me to become an effective educator. So I have completed a lot of trainings under the British Council and IDP here in the Philippines. I've also completed my IELTS teacher training in Australia. Plus, I also taught English in New South Wales in Australia for a company called Begina Education Center, which has branches in Lidcombe, Parramatta, and Rockdale. All right. So I got international and local experience teaching English and helping people prepare for their English exams. So without further ado, and for those who have already watched the first part of my test talk series, I'm sure you're already familiar with some of the stuff that I will be talking about, but I'm discussing them again for the sake of the people who are probably tuning in for the first time. So who needs to take the IELTS, by the way? What is the IELTS? It's the International English Language Testing System. It's an exam that you have to take if you want to work as a healthcare professional in the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Ireland. So that's why it's very popular. The IELTS is widely accepted in all the English-speaking countries, and obviously, what makes these countries popular is that they pay. Wow, they pay healthcare professionals really well. The only downside is in the US, there are two states that do not accept the TOEFL. We have Kansas and Nevada. So I would like to give credit to one of our viewers because after the video for the speaking section of the IELTS and TOEFL was posted, one of the viewers commented that in Ohio, it turns out that IELTS is now accepted. And I did my research. It turns out that Ohio has recently accepted the IELTS as proof of a healthcare professional's English proficiency. So shout out to that viewer. Thank you so much, guys. So again, just to rectify some of the things that I said in the first test talk, um, now we only have Kansas and Nevada as the two states of the US that do not accept the IELTS. But for the most part in the US, the IELTS is accepted. Now, what is the TOEFL IBT? TOEFL stands for Test of English as a Foreign Language. IBT stands for Internet-Based Test. So right off the bat, it tells you that you take this exam through a computer. It's your alternative to the IELTS. Why would you want an alternative to the IELTS? Some people find the IELTS exam difficult. In fact, it's not really unusual to hear stories of people taking the IELTS 2, 3, 4 times. And sometimes, despite the multiple attempts, these individuals, unfortunately, were not able to get the score that they want. And it doesn't mean that if you fail the IELTS that you are intellectually incapable of passing an English exam. It's like relationships. Maybe it's not for you. Hashtag hugot. So maybe it's not for you. So just like with the relationship, if it's not working out, maybe it's time for you to start looking at your other options. And one of your other options is the TOEFL IBT. So the TOEFL IBT, if you're going to pursue a career in the US, this is the best option because it's widely accepted in America. Almost every state accepts the TOEFL IBT. And in fact, in Kansas and Nevada, this is required. This is not optional. If you want to become a nurse in Kansas or Nevada, you have to take the TOEFL IBT. They do not accept the IELTS there. And probably some of you are wondering, what about the OET? Can we take the OET? What's with the occupational English test? I heard it's very popular. OET is widely accepted in the UK. So if you want to go to the UK, that's something worth looking at. If you want to work in Australia, fine. You can also consider taking the OET. But if it's the US that you want to go to, unfortunately, TOEFL is your best option because the OET is only accepted in the states of Florida and Oregon. And you can still have some problems with visa screen because if I'm not mistaken with visa screen, it's either the IELTS or the TOEFL. OET is like accepted for your approval of your license, but with the whole visa screen situation, I'm not yet 100% sure about that. Whereas with the TOEFL, you're guaranteed that it works for both your certification as a nurse and for your visa screen because at the end of the day, the TOEFL is the product of the United States of America. So why are you pushing this agenda of the US? Well, there's no denying that the US is among the top 10 countries that pay nurses very well. So if you cannot find opportunities in the UK, the next best thing has got to be the US. In fact, according to research, nurses in the US are paid more than people in the UK. The only advantage of nurses in the UK, based on my research at least, and I'm welcome for corrections here, but based on my research, the advantage of people working in the UK is that they have more benefits like paid leaves and other stuff similar to that. But when it comes to just pure monetary compensation, the US wins all the time. So, oy, may nasaktan daw. I'm so sorry. Is it about the relationship comparison? I'm just trying to break the ice. I don't want to become too serious. Life is already too serious, guys. Come on. No, let's have some fun every now and then. So, similar to the IELTS, the TOEFL is designed to test your reading, your listening, your speaking, and your writing skills. So, definitely, there are some things that you learn in the IELTS that can be applicable in the TOEFL, but not everything you learn for the IELTS can be used in the TOEFL. So let's take a look at the general differences between the two exams. So in the IELTS, let's say you filed for an exam on September 25. Why did I think of 25? Maybe I'm thinking of Christmas already. Anyway, let's say you're taking your IELTS exam on September 25. So during that day, you will take your IELTS listening, reading, and writing exam. Those three are the written components of the IELTS. You're taking them all on that particular day. What about the speaking test? Normally, the speaking test is conducted, or you will take the speaking test 2 to 3 days before the written exams, sometimes 2 to 3 days after the written exams. In some cases, 1 to 2 hours after the written exams. Bottom line, you're not going to deal with all 4 exams consecutively. So it's listening, reading, writing, and then there is a gap between those and the speaking section of the IELTS. In the IELTS, they use a 9-band scale. So the lowest possible score is 0. The highest possible score is 9. And what examiners do is they get the average of all your scores from all the 4 sections of the exam, and that becomes your overall band score for the IELTS. So let's say you got 7 in listening, 7 in reading, 6 in writing, 6 in speaking. Most likely, your overall band score for the IELTS will be 6.5 because that's the average of those 4 values. Excuse me. So what about the TOEFL IBT? So for the TOEFL IBT, it's a little bit different because instead of starting with the listening section, you will start with the reading section, followed by the listening section, and then you have a 10-minute break. This is something that you will not get in the IELTS exam. At least in the TOEFL, you get a brief break allowing you to regain your energy so that you can face the rest of the exam with confidence. After the 10-minute break, you have your speaking exam, and then you have your writing exam. So that's another key difference. In the Ielts, you take the written exams consecutively and then there's a gap between them and your speaking exam. But in the TOEFL, there's only a 10-minute gap, but after that, you're going to take the other parts of the test. So in other words, if you file for an exam on September 25, during your TOEFL IBT, you will deal with all the 4 sections of the test on that same day. And unlike the Ielts, the TOEFL uses a different grading system. It uses a 30 scale. So 0 is the lowest possible score, 30 is the perfect score for each section. And then what examiners do is they combine your score from each section and the sum of that will be your total TOEFL score. So let's say you got 20 in the reading section, 20 in listening, 20 in speaking, 20 in writing. That means your total score in the TOEFL is 80. 80, 80. All right. The IELTS is a little bit shorter than the TOEFL IBT. So it clocks in at 173 minutes. It's slightly shorter. So if you're the type of person that wants the test to be over right away, then maybe the IELTS is for you. But again, keep in mind, sometimes the speaking exam is conducted on a different day, which can be quite inconvenient, especially for healthcare workers who have a very strict schedule. If that's the case, consider taking the TOEFL IBT. Yes, it's slightly longer, but the exams are not conducted on different days. You're taking all 4 of them on the same day. The TOEFL lasts for at least 188 minutes. Yeah, sorry if I'm drinking water a lot because my throat gets dry easily. Maybe it's the tocino that I ate. I don't know. But when it comes to the format of the exam, the IELTS gives you 2 options. You can do it the old-fashioned way, like how you took your exams when you were in high school. The IELTS offers a paper-based exam. So what happens there is in the listening and reading section, you receive booklets containing questions, and then you're also provided with an answer sheet where you write all your answers. For the writing exam, you have a questionnaire containing the tasks that you have to complete, and then you have an answer sheet where you're going to write your response to the tasks. But if you don't like the old way of taking the test, the IELTS also offers a computer-delivered version of the test. So on the computer-delivered version of the test, obviously, you're going to type your answers using a keyboard. And then instead of reading your passages from a test booklet, you will be reading them through a computer monitor. Pretty much the same experience with the TOEFL IBT. The TOEFL IBT, everything is done through a computer. The difference, though, is the speaking section, which is something that I covered in the first part of our test talk series. In the IELTS exam, especially before the pandemic, the way that the speaking test works is you're face-to-face with an examiner. So it's a one-on-one interview. Excuse me. But due to COVID restrictions, sometimes you are going to have your interview with the examiner through a video conferencing platform like Zoom. But at any rate, you are still answering questions and the examiner is assessing your performance in real time. So there's someone looking at you while you're answering questions. And this can be a challenge for some people who are too self-conscious when they are using English. So if you're not that confident using the language when someone is looking at you, then maybe the IELTS speaking section is not for you. So we turn our attention to the TOEFL IBT. In the TOEFL IBT, so basically you're answering everything through a computer, but the speaking section is also answered through a computer. What does that mean? You're not talking to anyone in real time. All you're doing is you're recording your answers using a microphone, and then the examiners of ETS, which is the company that creates the TOEFL IBT, will assess your performance at a later time. All right? So if you're more confident that way, if you feel more comfortable speaking through a microphone instead of having someone watch over you while you're answering questions, then maybe the TOEFL is for you. The TOEFL originally had a paper-based version, but the company that creates it, ETS, decided to phase out the paper-based version of the exam in favor of the computer-based version of the test, especially in countries that have access to the internet. And in the Philippines, we have access to the internet. So that's why you're not hearing the paper-based version in the Philippines anymore. But in some countries, where they're still struggling to be connected to the internet, the paper-based version is still available. I'd also like to point out that the TOEFL offers a home edition, which is you can take the exam at the comfort of your own home. Now, before you get any idea of, hey, it's gonna be easier, like all my materials are here, people will be here to support me. No, they're very strict actually with the home edition. And based on feedback that I've been getting from people who have taken it, it's very prone to technical difficulties because this has only been recently introduced due to the pandemic. So if you want to take the TOEFL IBT, keep those things in mind. Technical difficulties and examiners are stricter when it comes to the home edition of the test. And for people who are going to the US, if I'm not mistaken, the CGFNS, the organization that processes applications of foreign educated healthcare professionals, I believe they have already released a statement saying that they're not accepting home edition of English exams. So again, take the home edition if you're sure that it's going to work for you, if it's something that meets your needs. But if it doesn't, then just go through the test and take it at a test center. Excuse me. So the IELTS and the TOEFL are both valid for 2 years, which gives you plenty of time to think about what you're going to do with your test result. That's why at Niner, sometimes you will hear some lecturers saying it's much better to take these English exams first before you look for employers, because what ends up happening is some people already found employers and now they are cramming to prepare for their test, and instead of focusing on test preparation, the pressure from the employer sometimes prevents them from focusing on doing the right things that will help them get a good score. So again, it's much better if you take the English exams first, and then that's when you start looking for opportunities. You have to remember, guys, we are in a pandemic, and at the end of the day, a lot of countries need healthcare professionals. So I strongly believe that you will not run out of opportunities. If you already have your English exam sorted out, it will be faster and it will be easier for you, because now you have one of the major requirements. The processing for you will be definitely shorter. All right. Okay, so we have a message from our admin. Guys, please remember to mute your microphone so that our discussion will not be interrupted. Don't worry, I'll give you time to ask me questions. By the end of this lecture, I promise you I'm going to accommodate as many questions as I can. For the time being, if there's something that you feel is unclear, feel free to write it down and we'll circle back to it later. So when are your test results available for the IELTS? So for the paper-based version of the exam, your results come out 13 days from your test date. The similar thing can be said, or a similar thing can be said with the paper copy of your results. So the paper copy of your results, the IELTS calls it TRF, or your test report form. What about people who decided to take the computer-based version of the IELTS? Your test results are available at an earlier time, 3 to 5 days from your test date. The same thing can be said about the paper copy of your test result. Now, what about the TOEFL IBT? The test result for your TOEFL IBT will be available online 6 days after your test, and a paper copy of your result will be mailed 11 days after your test date. The good thing about both the IELTS and the TOEFL IBT, they offer people the chance to have their performance reviewed. What's the benefit of that? If you truly believe that you deserve a higher score, you can apply for what the IELTS calls as remarking. When you apply for remarking, basically what you're asking from the examiners is that, hey, can you check my performance again? Just to see if I truly deserve the score that I got, or maybe I deserve something better. And in the IELTS, there are plenty of success stories when it comes to remarking. There are people who got 6.5, but after remarking, they got 7.5. But keep in mind that remarking is only applicable to speaking and writing. For the other sections of the exam, it's not recommended. Remarking does come at a cost. It will set you back by 6,680 pesos. So that's a combination of the remarking fee and the courier fee. The good news is, if your score changes, they will give your money back. And in the IELTS, only one of two things will happen. Either your score goes up or it stays the same. Okay, so let's say you took the IELTS, you feel like you deserve a better score, you can apply for remarking. And the success rate, I believe, is a lot higher compared to the TOEFL IBT. Because according to research in the TOEFL IBT, remarking, or what ETS calls as score review, only has a 10% success rate. So it's not really high. And on top of that, it's more expensive. If you want to apply for score review in the TOEFL IBT, you have to pay $80 per section, okay? In the Ielts, your 6,680 pesos already covers both the writing and the speaking section. But in the TOEFL, it's a different story. It's $80 per section. So you want your performance for speaking to be reviewed, that's $80. And then you also want your performance for writing to be reviewed, that's another $80. So that's a total of $160. And based on the current exchange rate, that's roughly around, I think, 8,000 pesos, which is of course a lot more expensive than the IELTS. When it comes to money, of course, we also have to talk about the test fee. So the IELTS, if you want to take it, you have to pay the test fee of 11,650 pesos. Okay, that's the test fee. It's fixed. In the Philippines, it's fixed. That's the test fee. With the TOEFL IBT, it's a little bit unpredictable because we are at the mercy of the peso and dollar exchange rate. So if you want to take the TOEFL IBT, you have to pay $225. And again, the price or the cost of this will vary depending on the peso and dollar exchange rate. If the US dollar is equivalent to 50 pesos, then I think the TOEFL IBT will set you back by around 11,200 or 11,300 pesos. If the US dollar goes down, then thankfully your TOEFL IBT will be cheaper than the IELTS. So for people who want to become nurses in the US, for the IELTS, you need to get a score of 7 in the speaking section and a total score of 6.5. So it doesn't really matter what you get in the reading, the listening, or the writing exam, as long as your total score is equivalent to 6.5 and you get a 7 in speaking. Speaking is the most important skill that you need in order for you to make your dream come true. Because even if you get 9 in reading, 9 in listening, 9 in writing, if you don't get 7 in speaking, you're not getting to the US as a nurse. And the same story can be applied to the TOEFL. In the TOEFL, you need a total score of 83 and a score of 26 in the speaking section. What your score in the reading, listening, and writing section will not matter as long as you get a total of 83. So, from my perspective as a former TOEFL test taker, the safe score here would be 20 for reading, 20 for listening, 20 for writing, and then you have your 26 in speaking. So that's a total of 86, which is higher than what you need. It's better to score higher than to score lower. So that would be your safe number there. Getting 20 in at least all the sections of the exam and 26 in speaking. All right? So look at this guy. He already lost hair. Thinking about, oh my goodness, writing. Who enjoys writing? Can you type in chat if you enjoy writing? Do you like writing? What's your response to that, guys? Do you enjoy writing? Can you show me your answers in chat? Because personally, me, I do enjoy writing, but not in the not in the sense that I'm doing it for an English exam. Because with English exams, there are a lot of things to take into account. Whereas if I'm just writing freestyle, I can say whatever I want. There's a sense of joy there because it's one way of expressing ourselves. Okay. So one of our admins, no, Miss Gladys said, doodling, not writing. Okay. I can support that. I actually doodle. I doodle during my IELTS exam because you're allowed to write whatever you want on the test booklet. So while I'm trying to think about the answers, I was doodling. It's good to relieve stress. Perfect for making you feel good while you're taking the exam. So look at this guy. He already lost his hair. He's so stressed. He can't make a decision. Which is easier? Is it IELTS writing or TOEFL writing? So let's talk about the kinds of tasks that you might encounter in your exam. Let's start with the IELTS. The first thing that you will notice here is that there's too many possibilities when it comes to the IELTS. All right? Bear in mind, nurses, that you need to take the academic module of the IELTS. There's another module out there called the general training module, and people take it when they want to become permanent residents, they want to apply for skilled work visa, or they're applying for student visa and they're pursuing a diploma or an associate degree, pretty much anything lower than a bachelor's degree. But if you want to become a healthcare professional in the US or in the UK, you need to take the IELTS academic module. For the UK test takers, you have to take what they call the UKBI. So specifically the UKBI. If you don't take the UKBI, then you have to retake the test again. So going back, with the IELTS, there's just too many possibilities. You can get a line graph. You can get a bar graph. You can get a pie chart. You can get a table. What's the problem with these? These types of tasks contain numbers, percentages, figures. So in order to get a high score in the IELTS exam, you need to do a little bit of mathematics. So there's some basic arithmetic going on. If you don't like math and you don't like English, then this will definitely test your patience. All right? It gets a little bit easier if you get a flow chart, a diagram, or a map. So me, at least fortunately, when I took the test in 2015, I got a map. I did not have to deal with numbers. The worst part is if you get a combination of these things. Sometimes you get a line graph and a pie chart. Sometimes you get a bar graph and a table. Sometimes you get a flow chart and a diagram. So it becomes a lot more difficult when you're faced with that kind of scenario. Whereas in the TOEFL, it's very consistent. You always have a passage, and you will read that passage for 3 minutes. Then it's followed by a lecture. The lecture talks about the content of the passage. And then all you have to do is to summarize the content of those two sources. So just by looking at this, it's very easy to tell that the TOEFL writing section is way, way easier than the IELTS writing section. No need to worry about numbers, no unpredictable task descriptions. It's always the same thing. A passage, a lecture, and you have to summarize it. Now, when it comes to the second task, IELTS writing task 2, you're going to be faced with different kinds of questions. You have, do you agree or disagree? To what extent do you agree or disagree? Do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? Discuss both views and give your opinion, and open-ended questions. So for do you agree or disagree, basically you're picking a side and you have to defend it. The same thing can be said with to what extent do you agree or disagree, and do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. For discuss both views and give your opinion, you are given 2 ideas and you have to talk about them in your essay. And finally, you have open-ended questions, which are somewhat unpredictable. There's no clear structure there. What matters is you're answering the question. In the IELTS writing section, you are given 1 hour to complete these 2 tasks. In writing task 1, you're required to write at least 150 words. In writing task 2, you're required to write at least 250 words. So plenty of time to complete them. And it's up to you how you'll divide that time. We'll talk about that more in detail later. So we have a section of this presentation dedicated to the differences between the duration of each task, all right? But let's now talk about the TOEFL. So TOEFL independent writing is actually very similar to IELTS writing task 2. Very similar, all right? So do you agree or disagree? To what extent do you agree or disagree? Discuss the advantages, or do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? These are pretty much the same as pick a side questions in the TOEFL independent task. And then obviously we have discuss both views questions in the IELTS, very similar to the discuss both views questions in the TOEFL. And then describe or explain is very close to open-ended questions in the IELTS. So for writing task 2 and TOEFL independent writing, there's really no clear winner when it comes to the nature of the questions because it's pretty much the same. So to recap, IELTS writing task 1, too many possibilities. TOEFL integrated task, predictable, always the same pattern. Passage, lecture, then summarize. IELTS writing task 2, very similar to the TOEFL independent writing task, all right? Now, I mentioned that there is a part of the presentation dedicated to the completion time, and this is it. Excuse me. So, you pretty much have the same completion time for writing task 1 of the IELTS and the TOEFL integrated task, which is 20 minutes. But in reality, with the IELTS, it's up to you how you will use your time. The examiners tell you that you have 60 minutes to complete the writing section, and it's up to you how you will use those 60 minutes. You can spend 40 minutes on task 2, 20 minutes on task 1, 30 minutes on task 2, 30 minutes on task 1, 35 minutes on task 2, 25 minutes on task 1. The decision is yours. However, at Niner, we recommend that you prioritize task 2 because it requires more words and it's worth more. Task 2 of the Ielts writing exam contributes 66.6% to your total score in writing. Whereas IELTS writing task 1 only contributes 33.3%. Sir, wait a minute. 66.6 plus 33.3. Sir, that's 99%. Where is the 0.1% coming from? You get the 0.1% when you show up. Wow, yes. Congratulations. You have a free 0.1%. The IELTS examiners are so generous. Okay. So that's why we tell our students to prioritize task 2 first because it's worth more than work on task 1 with whatever time you have left. Now, keep in mind, you cannot write less than 150 words for your IELTS writing task 1 output. If you do that, you might get a score around 5 in terms of task achievement. Why is that? Well, you were not able to follow instructions. So, what about me? I'm taking the paper-based exam. Are they going to count the number of words? Not necessarily, but IELTS examiners are so used to assessing reports and essays that they can easily tell when a report lacks the required number of words. And if you're taking the computer-based version of the exam, the software that you will be using has a feature that shows how many words you've written. So it's very, very important in IELTS writing task 1 to write at least 150 words. Now, what about the TOEFL integrated writing task? Same story. You're going to write for 20 minutes, but the difference is, in IELTS writing task 1, it's up to you if you will use 20 minutes or not. In TOEFL, you are only given 20 minutes, no more, no less. Once your 20 minutes have expired, then you get access to the second task. So you see the difference there. So TOEFL, although a little bit easier, they're stricter with the time. So again, 20 minutes exactly given for you to complete the TOEFL integrated writing task. And unlike the IELTS where you are required to write at least 150 words, in the TOEFL, it's more of a recommendation because basically, the grading criteria that the TOEFL gives to the public does not state anything about the exact number of words. Even when you take their exam, the instruction in their questionnaire does not contain anything about the specific number of words that you have to use. However, based on my research, essays that get a high score normally contain at least 150 to 225 words. So if you want to get a high score for the TOEFL writing exam, please write at least 150 words. Now, how is your output graded in those tasks? So for IELTS writing task 1, there are 4 grading criteria. We have task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, grammatical range, and accuracy. So what does task achievement mean? When it comes to writing task 1 of the IELTS, it means were you able to highlight the key features of your task? If you're dealing with a line graph, if you're dealing with anything with a number, were you able to discuss trends, if there are trends? Were you able to talk about variables or categories with the highest figure and the lowest figure? Were you able to compare these categories and variables? Were you able to state a clear overview? And were you able to write in a formal manner? When we say formal manner, that means you're not using contractions, you're not using informal language, and you're writing in block format. What does block format mean? You're writing from margin to margin of your answer sheet, and you're leaving one space between your paragraphs. If you are able to do that, you can get 7 of, if you're able to answer yes to all my questions, says, yes, I can do that, then you can get 7 or higher for task achievement. Oh, and another thing for task achievement, were you able to write 150 words? So if you say, yes, I can do that, if you say yes to that, then you can get 7 or higher in task achievement. Now, what about coherence and cohesion? Coherence and cohesion pertains to the quality of your output being very easy to understand. So what I mean by that is when the examiner reads your output, they don't need you to explain things. Like your output stands on its own. Ideas are presented in a logical manner. And on top of that, you're able to use cohesive devices and conjunctions which allow you to form connections between ideas, words, phrases, and sentences that you wrote in your output. If you say, yes, I can do that, then you can get 7 or higher for coherence and cohesion. Another thing that examiners look at when it comes to coherence and cohesion is, can you do proper paragraphing? When you separate your paragraphs, are you able to show clear ideas in every paragraph? Do you know proper paragraphing? That's another thing that they're going to examine when it comes to coherence and cohesion. When it comes to lexical resource, you want to show the examiner that you know a lot of English words. Avoid using the same words over and over again. And if you can show them that you can use less common lexical items and you also demonstrate knowledge of collocations, that's also a plus for your lexical resource. The challenge with a lot of people is vocabulary. Because of their limited vocabulary, most test takers end up using the same words over and over again. So my advice to you when it comes to the IELTS, don't really look for highfalutin words. Because some people, what they do, oh, I'm going to read the dictionary, I'm going to read the book, and that's well and good. But if your goal to read a book or to read the dictionary is to use or learn words that you can use for the IELTS, I think that's not the best way to expand your vocabulary, because in reality, the words that you will learn, you'll never use them in the exam. And I think people who have taken the test before can attest to that. You've read books for long hours, you picked up new words, but you never actually used them in the exam. Why is that? You're using words that you were never comfortable with in the first place. So for writing, I would suggest that when
you
you're...
never used your and
I'm sorry. Yes? Do we have someone asking a question? I think I heard someone. My bad. Was I mishearing things? Is it coming from my house? Pope, are you talking? Talk to me. So I have a special guest behind me. Anyway, yeah, going back. When it comes to writing, my recommendation, when you're practicing, try to look at your output and check for words that you use a lot. And then look for synonyms of those words. That's the best way to expand your vocabulary, because now you're just basically looking for synonyms or alternatives to words that you use a lot. And it's easier to remember these words because you're using them a lot. You're simply using for replacements or looking for replacements, if that makes sense, right? So for me, at least, that's what I tell my students, whether they're taking the IELTS or the TOEFL, that's the best course of action when it comes to expanding your vocabulary. It's not looking for words that you will never use in the actual exam. That's not a practical way of preparing for the test. Some people may argue that my methodology is not, the best way to go, but hey, it works. At 9.09er, we try to make the test easier, not complicated. And then you have grammatical range and accuracy. Okay? When it comes to grammatical range and accuracy, what the examiners want to see is your ability to use different sentence structures. Sir, isn't it all about constructing sentences that do not contain errors? Isn't that what it's all about? Well, you're correct. With that kind of mentality, you're correct. Because if you look at the criteria, it says accuracy. So that means your sentences cannot contain a lot of mistakes. But at the same time, the criteria also mentions range. So maybe some of you are thinking, you know what? The best way to go about this is to just write a bunch of simple sentences. That way, I will not commit errors and I will get a 9 for grammatical range and accuracy. No. If you use nothing but simple sentences, the examiner is most likely to give you a 5 for grammatical range and accuracy, because yes, you did not commit mistakes, but to the examiner, your knowledge of English is only at a basic level because you can only use simple sentences. To avoid that problem, use different sentence structures. Throw in some compound sentences. What's an example of a compound sentence? I don't know if you've heard this song, but I like her, but I love you. That's an example of a compound sentence. That's an example of a compound sentence. You have two simple sentences combined by the word but, which is a coordinating conjunction. What's an example of a complex sentence? This is also from a song. That's why I love using songs in my lectures. Because of you, my life has changed. Because of you cannot stand on its own. That's a dependent clause. My life has changed is a simple sentence. That on its own is complete. You combine them together, you have a complex sentence. You throw in a few, oh, my voice is cracking because I'm pretty young. you throw you throw in a few compound sentences, you throw in a few complex sentences in your output, you will be able to get 7 or higher in grammatical range and accuracy. On top of the fact that, of course, you're not committing a lot of grammatical errors. When I say a lot, that would mean at least 70% of your sentences are grammatically correct. So you follow that advice, you do that, you should get 7 or higher for grammatical range and accuracy. So one thing you'll notice with each criteria of writing task 1, we are the examiners are also using the 9-band scale. So each grading criteria, you are graded from 0 to 9. And what examiners do, they combine your score for task achievement plus your score for coherence and cohesion plus your score for lexical resource plus your score for grammatical range and accuracy, and they get the average of that. That becomes your score for writing task 1. Okay? What about the Toefl, sir? The Toefl is not as not as meticulous as the Ielts. So see what I'm talking about? When something is not as meticulous, you already know that it's the easier exam. It's not as meticulous as the Ielts because with the Toefl, what they do is they grade your output in a holistic manner. So to help you further understand, this is the rubrics that examiners in the Toefl use. Thank you, admin. Yeah, convert to Toeflism. If you're not a natural writer, come, join me in the religion of Toeflism. So, in the Toefl integrated task, your output is graded from a scale of 0 to 5. 0 to 5. Okay. Oh, sir, you said earlier the perfect score is 30. Okay, no, just relax. We'll get to that eventually. But let me just get back to my point. For the integrated task, you are graded from 0 to 5. Okay, so the lowest, of course, is 0. Perfect score will be 5. My recommendation is if you're taking the Toefl, aim for at least a 3 or a 4. Okay? When you get 3, that's already a good sign that you will get an acceptable score for the writing section to the point that it can pull your grade up if you encounter problems with the listening and the reading section. But again, remember, you still need to get 26 in speaking. That's the most important section of the exam. So when it comes to getting a 3, what are the requirements? So let's just get it straight from the horse's mouth. So if you want to get a 3, your response should contain some important information from the lecture and convey relevant connection to the passage. Okay? Another thing that examiners are looking at when they're planning to give you a 3 are the following. Your output should have an oriented response. It may contain some vague, inaccurate, or unclear information. But you see, that's the beauty of the Toefl. Even though you're imperfect, you can still get a high score. You look at the second bullet point, your output can omit a major key point and it will still receive a good score. Some key points made in the lecture or reading or connections between the two may be incomplete, inaccurate, or imprecise. Look at that third bullet point. So even if you make mistakes, you can still get an acceptable score, which is 3. And finally, you can commit mistakes when it comes to the use of English grammar. You can make mistakes when it comes to your word choice, but you can still get a decent score. I bet some of you are surprised, right? Because when you hear of the Ielts, the idea that comes to mind is, oh, perfection. I need to be really good. We have an English exam after all that is not that strict. Right? So again, consider converting to Toeflism, people who are planning to go to the US. All right. Now, what about the second task? So I don't want to keep things from you guys, so I want to be really transparent. This is where the Ielts has a slight advantage. Because if you combine the completion time for writing task 1 and writing task 2 of the Ielts, you get a total of 60 minutes, 1 hour. But in the Toefl, you only have 50 minutes. So you're supposed to write a lot, but you're given a shorter completion time here. But I promise you, it's humanly possible. I promise you it's easier. And again, I will continue explaining it later why the TOEFL is the easier choice when it comes to writing. So for IELTS writing task 2, you're given 40 minutes to write an essay about the given topic, and you need to write at least 250 words. If you don't write 250 words, you might get into trouble. You might not get a score that you want. And again, when it comes to the completion time, it's totally up to you. Like I said, how you use your 60 minutes in the IELTS writing section is up to you. You can spend 30 minutes on task 2, 30 minutes on task 1. You can spend 35 minutes on task 2, 25 minutes on task 1. That's your call. But in the TOEFL, for the integrated task, you are given exactly 30 minutes, no more, no less, to complete your essay. And the worst part, you need to write at least 300 words. Okay. So, sir, 300, that's very long. I agree. But 300 is not actually required. If we look at the grading criteria, and we will be doing that later, if we look at the grading criteria for the integrated writing task of the TOEFL, well, there's really no specification about the number of words you need to write. In fact, when you take your exam, there's no instruction there that specifically states how many words you need to use. This is a recommendation. Based on my research, people that get a score of 4 or 5 in their output for the integrated task normally write at least 300 words. But the difference is, in the IELTS, if you wrote less than 250 words, that's already heading to a direction of a bad score. But in the TOEFL, if you wrote less than 300 words, it's not a big deal. As long as you're still responding to the task effectively, you're fine. You're fine. So see, that's what I'm saying when it comes to the leniency of the TOEFL. They're not that strict with words. They don't even have instructions for the number of words. But again, based on my experience and research, if you want to get a high score, write at least 300 words, okay? So what's the grading criteria for IELTS writing task 2? It's very similar to IELTS writing task 1. The difference is task response. So they call this one task response. If you want to get 7 or higher here, for IELTS writing task 2, you have to answer questions, support your answers, give a clear conclusion. That's it. So for example, if you say that, Sir Marlone is handsome, you cannot simply say that. You have to support that in order for you to get a high score in IELTS writing task 2. The rest, pretty much the same with writing task 1. For the TOEFL independent task, similar to the integrated task, your output is graded in a holistic manner. So once again, the safe score is 3. Your output for the independent task is graded on a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being the lowest, 5 being perfect, and the safest score, again, based on my experience, based on what nurses need, is 3. So how do you get 3 for your independent writing essay? So first, you need to address the topic and task using somewhat developed explanations, exemplifications, or details. It doesn't even have to be fully explained. You just need to give some evidences here and there, and you're fine. You can still get a good score. You also have to display unity, progression, coherence, though connection of your ideas may be obscured. So what does that mean? As long as you're showing that words, sentences, phrases, ideas are connected to one another, even if the connection is sometimes not that clear, you can still get a good score in the TOEFL writing section. Your essay is demonstrating inconsistent facility in sentence formation. In other words, grammatical errors, causing your sentences to be difficult to understand. You can still get a 3 as long as you're just doing it occasionally, not all the time. Okay? And then you can misuse words, but still get a good score in this part of the exam. So, in summary, right now, I'm telling you guys, it's easier to get a high score in TOEFL writing than IELTS writing. So how do we come to the conclusion of, hey, you said earlier that the perfect score for each section of the TOEFL is 30. How do we come to that conclusion if the integrated task is graded from 0 to 5 and the independent task is graded from 0 to 5? How do we get to 30? So the formula that examiners use here is that your grade for the independent task plus your grade for the integrated task, Oh, hi.
Wala na
We got people speaking. Hello. Do you have questions? Again, we have a portion for of our lecture dedicated to questions, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. But yeah, going back, the way that it works in the TOEFL, your score for the integrated task, which is the first one, plus your score for the independent task will be combined, and it will result into your raw score. So let's say you got 5 in the integrated task, 4 in the independent task. That means your raw score is equivalent to 9. And then all you have to do is follow this table. Okay? 9 as a raw score is equivalent to 28 in the TOEFL. So, sir, why were you saying that 3? 3 is like a safe score. So, at the beginning of the lecture, I said that ideally, you want to get at least 20 per section of the exam, except for speaking where you want to get 26. So if you get 3 in the integrated task and 3 in the independent task, your raw score is equivalent to 6. 6, when converted to the TOEFL grading system, is gonna result into 20, which is again the score that you want to get if you want to work in the US as a nurse. All right. Are you guys doing good? Are we all well? I hope you are. Again, don't mind my special guest. He's here to guide us. He's just in the background. All right. So here we have a sample of a task for the writing section of the Ielts. This one is specifically for writing task 1. This is a bar graph. So it says here you should spend 20 minutes on this task, but again, that's clearly up to you. Examiners will not monitor you and say, hey, don't spend more than 20 minutes on this. That's not how it works. It's up to you how you will use your time for the writing section. So it says here the chart shows the number of men and women in further education in Britain and 3 periods, and whether they were studying full-time or part-time. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So if you want to get 7 or higher in IELTS writing task 1, one thing that you have to be mindful of are the parts of your graph. All right. So how many parts do you have here? So here to your left, you have the units of measurement, and then you have the time element, and then you have variables, 2 variables, a black bar and a gray bar. Black bar represents full-time education, gray bar represents part-time education. And apart from that, you also have to consider that data are categorized according to gender. So many things to think about. And then you also have to do, again, some arithmetic here every now and then in order to avoid what we call mechanical enumeration. So in my 6 years of teaching the IELTS, in all my time being trained by IELTS examiners from the British Council, from IDP, from IELTS Australasia, the fastest way to commit mechanical enumeration is to simply say numbers. For example, in 1970 and 1971, 1,000 males are in part-time education. Okay? A decade later, there's more than 800,000 of them in part-time education. If you're simply enumerating, dictating, stating numbers, that can be construed as mechanical enumeration. And mechanical enumeration often leads to a 5 for task achievement. You see the problem there? How do you avoid that? Now you have to do a little bit of math every now and then. So 100,000 minus 800,000, you can say approximately 200,000 is the difference between those 2 variables. And you have to do that from time to time with your output to avoid mechanical enumeration. So that's one thing that makes IELTS writing difficult, the numbers. If you're not good with your numbers, it's going to be really hard for you. You also have to be mindful of comparative adjectives. That's another way of avoiding mechanical enumeration. You know, your ERs, higher, lower, bigger, smaller, larger, faster, longer, taller, shorter. These are words that you have to use in order to compare data. Because like I said, in order to get a score of 7 or higher for task achievement, you have to compare data. So many things to think about when it comes to IELTS writing task 1. So another example of a task description for this exam. Let me just erase all the stuff that I've drawn. Here, all drawings. Yay! Nice. So we have Ielts writing task 1 again, but this is an example of a diagram, and obviously this is a lot easier because it doesn't involve numbers. So here we have a diagram that shows us the process of brick manufacturing, and your job is to summarize the information that is presented here. If you're going to tell me, oh, step 1 is digging, step 2 metal grid, step 3 wire cutter, that's also mechanical enumeration. Because if you want to get 7 or higher in the IELTS exam, you don't simply tell the reader in what order are these stages taking place. You also have to establish what's happening in each stage and how this stage affects the other stage. You see the problem there? Again, too much work, too much effort. But with the TOEFL, no, it's a lot easier. So for the TOEFL, this is what you do. You're given 3 minutes to read this passage. This is a typical TOEFL passage. This one has been taken from, I believe this is from the official guide to the TOEFL test, the 6th edition. It's a very authentic practice material. So if I have people out there who are interested in taking the TOEFL IBT, this is what you will be getting in your actual exam. Because the official guide to the TOEFL is pretty much a simulation of the TOEFL IBT. So this is a typical TOEFL writing passage. You're given 3 minutes to read it. When you read it, you have to establish or identify what's the topic of the passage and then look for 3 supporting ideas. So let's read it together. In the 1950s, Torreya taxifolia, a type of evergreen tree once very common in the state of Florida, started to die out. No one is sure exactly what caused the decline, but chances are good that if nothing is done, Torreya will soon become extinct. Experts are considering 3 ways to address the decline of Torreya. That's already a clue. 3. So that means there are 3 things that you have to look for. What are the 3 ways to prevent the decline of the Torreya? The first option is to reestablish Torreya in the same location in which it thrived for thousands of years. Torreya used to be found in abundance in the northern part of Florida, which has a specific microclimate. A microclimate exists when weather conditions inside a relatively small area differ from the region of which that area is a part. Northern Florida's microclimate is very favorable to Torreya's growth. This microclimate is wetter and cooler than the surrounding region's relatively dry, warm climate. Scientists have been working to plant Torreya seeds in the coolest, dampest areas of the microclimate. Now, guys, during your TOEFL IBT, you are given a piece of paper and a writing instrument, normally a pencil, that allows you to take notes. When you're reading your passage, do take note of the important subtopics mentioned here, because after that, you will listen to a lecture and you have to determine whether the professor in the lecture is contradicting or supporting the content of the passage. So these 3 things that we're looking for in the passage, later on, they will be mentioned again in the recording. But the professor will either agree to those 3 things or maybe she will oppose them. So keep that in mind. What I normally tell my students when it comes to dealing with the TOEFL, you have to find the balance between reading and taking notes. Because sometimes people are too obsessed with writing down stuff that they fail to understand what they're reading. So believe me when I say this, if you focus too much on writing, there is a chance that even if you look at your notes, you won't understand what you're reading because you never bothered understanding it in the first place. Yes, you have keywords on your notes, but they cannot help you remember what exactly you read because you did not comprehend the passage. So find the balance between understanding what you're reading and taking notes. All right. Now let's go to the next paragraph. The second option is to move Torreya to an entirely different location far from its Florida microclimate. Torreya seeds and saplings have been successfully planted and grown in forests further north, where the temperature is significantly cooler. Some scientists believe that Torreya possibly thrived in areas much further north in the distant past. So by relocating it now, in a process known as assisted migration, humans would simply be helping Torreya return to an environment that is more suited to its survival. So let's recap the first two paragraphs. What are the important things here? Okay, in the first paragraph, our writer mentions that an effective way of preserving Torreya is to put it back where it thrived for thousands of years. Where is that? In Florida. Why Florida? Because Florida has the microclimate that will allow the Torreya to survive. So that's your first major point. Florida is a great place to raise Torreya because in Florida, there is evidence that it survived there. So that's option number one. Option number two, put it in a totally different place in a process called assisted migration. Okay, you're going to put it in a place, not Florida, but further north. Okay, further north where it's a lot cooler. Because this kind of environment is also going to help the Torreya survive. And now let's look at the final point. The third option is to preserve the Torreya in research centers. Okay, why should they use research centers? Seeds and saplings can be moved from the wild and preserved in a closely monitored environment where it will be easier for scientists both to protect the species and to conduct research on Torreya. This research can then be used to ensure the continued survival of the species. So the third option, research centers where scientists can look after them and study them. So those are the three major points here. What's the main topic? Main topic, how to prevent the Torreya from becoming extinct. What are the three ways of doing that? We have putting them in Florida, where they have a history of surviving. You have assisted migration, where they can be placed further north, where the climate is going to promote their growth as well. And then we have research centers where scientists will protect and study them. So those are the three important ideas from our passage. Now let's listen to a lecture about the topic of the passage. Again, what you want to do is to listen carefully for the opinion of the professor. You need to establish whether the professor is going to support or oppose the content of the passage. Also, the moment that the professor speaks, it's important to write down the gender of the professor so that you're not going to get the pronoun wrong. Before we start, I'm going to conduct a sound check. If you can hear the recording, please type yes in chat.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic you just read.
Guys, were you able to hear that? All right, thank you so much. Oh, Isa, how are you, mate? Thank you, admin. Let's see if I can make it louder. Louder, like the thunder. Is it raining where you are, guys? Because it's really raining hard here. Starting to get worried. I hope that it will not affect our power supply. All right, guys, let's listen to the lecture.
You've just read about 3 ways to save Torreya taxifolia. Unfortunately, none of these 3 options provides a satisfactory solution. About the first solution, reestablishing Torreya in the same location, that's unlikely to be successful because of what's happening to the coolest, dampest areas within Torreya's microclimate. These areas are being strongly affected by changes in the climate of the larger region. This could be because global warming has contributed to an increase in overall temperatures in the region, or because wetlands throughout Florida have been drained. Either way, many areas across the region are becoming drier, so it's unlikely that Torreya would have the conditions it needs to survive anywhere within its original Florida microclimate. Now, about the second solution, relocating Torreya far from where it currently grows, well, let's look at what happened when humans helped another tree, the black locust tree, move north to a new environment. When they did this, the black locust tree spread so quickly that it killed off many plants and trees in the new environment, and some of these plants and trees were themselves already in danger of becoming extinct. So assisted migration can have unpredicted outcomes for the new environment. Third, research centers are probably not a solution either. That's because the population of Torreya trees that can be kept in the centers will probably not be able to resist diseases. For a population of trees to survive a disease, it needs to be relatively large and it needs to be genetically diverse. Tree populations in the wild usually satisfy those criteria, but research centers would simply not have enough capacity to keep a large and diverse population of Torreya trees, so trees in such centers will not be capable of surviving diseases in the long term.
Okay, nice. So, the instruction of our examiner here is to summarize the points made in the lecture, being sure to explain how they cast doubt on the specific solutions presented in the reading passage. So obviously, if we recall what our professor said, she does not believe that these solutions will prevent the extinction of the Torreya. The first thing that she mentions is global warming. Because of global warming, Florida is now warm and dry, so it does not have any more the conditions that will help the Torreya to survive. The second thing she mentions is assisted migration has unpredictable outcomes. For example, when human beings did that with the black locust tree, it ended up ruining the ecosystem where it was introduced. So that's also a bad idea. And then for the research center, according to our professor, the problem with that is the Torreya that is raised in a research center will not have genetic diversity, which helps this tree develop resistance to diseases. So if it's not resistant to diseases, eventually they will still die in a research center. So now we're going to write our output. Let's do it for 20 minutes. My tip for everyone, so I'm using Microsoft Word 2016. If you're practicing, whether you're practicing or preparing for your Ielts or your Toefl, I suggest you turn off your grammar and your spell checker. To do this, you can go to File. Let me start that again. Go to File, select Options, go to Proofing. Then you can turn off your spell checker and your grammar checker. Because you don't want to get used to writing with those tools activated, since they will definitely make you a better writer, but in the actual exam, these tools will be absent. So if you are creating good essays, if you are able to write down wonderful outputs, but you're using these tools, you're pretty much just deceiving yourself. So I'm going to write for 20 minutes. Let me set my timer. Now, please remember that I am not Brainy Brian. I cannot really talk while I'm writing. I am normally quiet while I'm writing, but I'll do my best to discuss stuff after I've finished my output. The 20 minutes start now. So let's start with the passage. Best to always start with the passage. The passage provides information on how to prevent the extinction of Torreya. According to my notes, it's double R. The Torreya trees. And then after establishing the information from the passage, state the position of the professor. The professor goes against the information in the passage. Now, to start your first paragraph, you want to use a cohesive device to help you get a good score in your output. When you use cohesive devices, it will allow you to establish connections. So a typical cohesive device here could be first of all, or you can say first and foremost. The passage states that, first thing that she said, okay, passage, okay, Florida, that Torreya should be raised in northern Florida, where it flourished for thousands of years, since that area has the conditions that are suited for the survival of this tree. However, the professor mentions that due to global warming, Florida is now warm and dry, and it is not anymore conducive to raising the Korea. After you're done saying the content of the passage, immediately add the information from the lecture. This way, you're constantly comparing and contrasting the two sources. Furthermore, the writer of the article claims that assisted migration can be used to preserve Korea trees. By contrast, the professor states or says that assisted migration can have unpredictable outcomes, and she referenced the time that people used it on black locust trees, which resulted into the destruction of the ecosystem where it was introduced. Therefore, assisted migration is not exactly an ideal solution. Finally, so I'm using the word finally to indicate that this is my last paragraph. We're going to talk about the final content of the passage according to the passage. Areas can be raised or grown in research centers where they will be protected or where scientists will look after and study them. On the contrary, the professor claims this is an ineffective answer to the problem of the possible extinction of the Korea, because research centers do not promote genetic diversity, which the tree needs to be resistant to diseases. This Korea trees research centers will eventually die. All right. So 213 words, not bad. Still have 14 minutes left, guys. So plenty of time to edit our work. So yeah, it's humanly possible to write it in just what? 6 minutes, 7 minutes? So now, this is something that I tell my students when you're dealing not just with the Ielts, but with the Toefl. Don't be afraid to repeat words while you're typing. Do not be too conscious with your language use while you're typing, because as long as you're expressing yourself freely, you will be able to produce a decent output. Now, whatever time you have left, that's when you start beautifying your work. So let's see what I can do here to make it better. I think I'm happy with my introduction. Let's see if I'm using some words over and over again. I'm not too happy with how I use the word however here. So what we can see is, on the contrary, there we go, by contrast, then this is where I put however. All right. Also notice, guys, whenever I'm talking about the professor in the passage, I'm really mostly using the simple present tense, because what you want to express here is that you are talking about these ideas right now. Even though the lecture is something that we heard before now, we're still going to use the present tense because we're pretty much discussing this information at this very moment. And also, examples given by examiners when it comes to outputs for the integrated task, they do normally make use of verbs in the present tense, especially for verbs after the word passage or the professor. In the Ielts, people are too afraid to repeat words like this. Oh, I'm so afraid to use the word passage over and over again. I'm so afraid to use the word professor over and over again. That's not going to be a problem with the TOEFL. I can promise you that because I did the same thing in my exam and it was okay. I got a good score. All right. So while other people are too afraid of their word choice in the IELTS exam, I strongly believe that this will not be a problem in your TOEFL test if you decide to take the TOEFL, of course. So this kind of output will get you at the very least a 3, a maximum of 4 or 4.5. Why is that? We were able to cover all the important parts of the passage and the lecture. And on top of that, we were able to write at least 150 words. And of course, we completed this task within the given time frame. So we have here the idea about the passage where, okay, we're supposed to put the Torreya in northern Florida because it has the best conditions for that tree to survive. But then the professor contradicts it and says, hey, because of global warming, well, Florida is now warm and dry. It's not going to survive there anymore. And then for our next paragraph, we talk about assisted migration. And then in the final paragraph, we talk about research centers. So this is how you get a good score in the integrated task of the TOEFL. So notice that the structure of a TOEFL integrated essay is you have your introduction and your overview together, and then followed by your body paragraphs. You don't need a conclusion in the TOEFL IBT. Some people will say it's necessary, some people will say it's not, but the TOEFL examiners clearly did not say anything about this. So they did not say anything about, hey, you really need to put a conclusion there. No. I attended their preparation course. So it's an official course by ETS. And based on my interactions with the examiner, none of them mentioned anything about conclusions. So even if you don't have a conclusion here, you're perfectly fine. When is the best time to use a conclusion? Maybe if you're not able to write 150 words, you can write a conclusion there. But again, it's not required. What matters is you covered all the important points of the passage and all the important points of the lecture. Another thing that I would say that you need to learn is to use cohesive devices that are ideal for contrasting and contradicting information. So study how to use, however, on the contrary, by contrast, these kinds of expressions are perfect for showing the differences between the passage and the lecture because more often than not, the lecture will contradict the passage. It is very rare for the professor to agree with the passage. All right. So I hope I was able to shed some light on this matter. Okay. Now let's move on to the next kind of task. Oh, before that, okay. This is the interface for the integrated writing section of the TOEFL. So you'll see its different parts here. So in the orange square, you have here the instruction. The green square shows you the editing tools which can help you change stuff once you're done writing your essay. You also have the blue square which contains the word counter. It shows you how many words you've already written. The red square is the space where you write your essay. Below that, you have the timer which shows you how much time you have left. And in the pink box is the passage. So the way it works is, once you get to the writing section of the TOEFL, you are told to read the passage for 3 minutes. And then you will move to the next slide, which will show you the lecture, and you have a button that you can press to play it. And after that, you get this screen, the one that you see right now. And the good thing about it is, let's say you missed some important info from the passage earlier, you will be able to see it again. So at least you get the chance to double check if what you're writing is correct. See? That's how easy it is. And we still have time. From the time from our integrated task, there's still 8 minutes left. So see, it's humanly possible to write a solid output. A solid output. I had to go down for my pen. A solid output for just 7 or 8 minutes. All it takes is practice and understanding strategies. Because at Niner, we teach students templates that will help them write faster. So if you're one of our students, we will be more than happy to share those templates with you. But of course, due to time limits or restrictions, I cannot discuss everything about the TOEFL writing task with you guys tonight. Let's move to the independent writing task of the TOEFL. So this is the interface that you will see immediately after finishing your integrated task. You are greeted by this screen. So in the green box, you have your question. In the yellow box, you have editing tools. The red arrow is pointing to a word counter, which shows you how many words you've written. And then the space in the blue box is where you write your essay. So like I said earlier, the questions or the tasks in writing task 2 of the Ielts are very similar to the type of task descriptions that you will encounter in the TOEFL. Let me just silence my phone. I'm sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't think that people would be contacting me at this time. I'm not that popular. Going back. Sorry for that interruption. Going back. So, again, pick a side questions are very similar to agree or disagree. To what extent do you agree or disagree? And do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? So we have here a sample question. Online learning is much better than classroom learning. Do you agree or disagree? And then we have discussed both views. Again, very similar to the IELTS. Some people prefer to gain knowledge from books. Others prefer knowledge gained from experience. Discuss both views and give your opinion. And then finally, you have describe or explain, which is very similar to open-ended questions in the IELTS. How do movies or television affect the way people behave? Okay. What makes TOEFL writing, independent writing, easier than IELTS writing task 2? Because I did mention that you have less time to write your TOEFL essay than your IELTS essay, and you need more words for it. Number one, based on my interactions with examiners, based on my trainings with them, so based on what I know about the IELTS, examiners are not really big fans of personal examples. So you may want to, use first-person pronouns in moderation for the IELTS writing exam. Whereas in the TOEFL, go nuts. Go nuts with personal experiences. Examiners do not mind. Okay, so that's one thing. The beauty of personal experiences is it gives you more freedom to fabricate information. Whereas if you're using information and presenting it in the third person, it's rather difficult to fabricate stuff because you're making it sound like everybody knows this. It's general information. So now the problem is if your examiner does not know that, you pretty much gave it away that it's really fabricated. Whereas in the TOEFL writing exam, when you fabricate information, it's harder to determine that since you're using personal examples. People cannot challenge your experiences. They don't know exactly what you've been through. So keep that in mind. That's the advantage of the TOEFL. You can use personal examples. Another thing is the balancing of the paragraphs. So in the IELTS, if you want to get 7 or higher for writing task 2, as much as possible, all your paragraphs are equally developed. So what do you mean by equally developed? So let's say your second paragraph, you used 4 lines. The next paragraph, you have to use 4 lines, 5 lines, or 3 lines. The disparity cannot be more than 1. If you end up, let's say, using 4 lines for the second paragraph and 10 lines on the third paragraph, to the examiner, pretty much the impression that you left is, wait a minute, this person can talk about this at length, but this paragraph was not discussed at length. To me, that's not properly developed. So you can have problems with task achievement or task response there. In the TOEFL, go nuts. One paragraph can be a lot longer than the other one, and it's perfectly fine. So again, it's these rules that a lot of people don't know, these rules that are not really common knowledge to test takers. This is what sets the IELTS apart from the TOEFL. And that's why, in my opinion, IELTS writing can be a little bit harder compared to TOEFL writing. So let's try answering a TOEFL question right now. Let's try to get that one. Let's take a screenshot of. Let's discuss both views. It's very close to my heart because when I took my IELTS exam, I got a discuss both views question. Let's do that. That's going to be my topic today. Okay, some people prefer to gain knowledge. Let's just fix the text wrapping. Okay, we good. Oops. All right. So, similar to the IELTS, your TOEFL essay should have three elements: an introduction, a body paragraph, and a conclusion. And at Niner, what we tell our students is if you want to get a good score in the IELTS, normally your introduction should have at least 2 sentences. And I pretty much did the same thing with my TOEFL exam and it worked. So if you want to take the TOEFL and you want to get a high score in your independent essay, make sure to write at least 2 sentences in your introduction. Now, what about the body paragraphs? Ideally, because you need more words in the TOEFL, your body paragraphs should have at least 4 sentences. And try to construct them this way. You can start with an argument, followed by a reason, and then an example, and then a supporting idea. I'll demonstrate how that works. Let me just fix the paragraphing here. I like spaces between my sentences. I want them to be close. I just wanna be close to you. Okay, how do you write an introduction for the TOEFL? Similar to the IELTS, which I'm sure you already know because you've already seen lectures of Sir Brian and other IELTS writing experts on IFNG. Simply paraphrase your task description. So I'm going to set my timer to 30 minutes. All right, so let's just paraphrase the task description. Here we go. There are individuals who enjoy learning from books. However, there are those who choose to learn from experience. This essay will discuss both views. On the one hand, getting information from books is a safe way to learn. The writer of these materials have already gone through painstaking experiences to prove their theories, saving the readers from the dangers of testing out these theories themselves. For example, a book about toxic chemicals will tell the reader that drinking muriatic acid will have negative effects to one's health and can lead to death. Because of this, the reader will not even try to ingest this substance since the book has already provided information about the dangers of doing this. Okay, I only have 122 words. So it's okay to look at your word counter at Microsoft Word because in the actual exam, well, you have a word counter as well. So I'll worry about that later. I will work on my next paragraph now. On the other hand, learning from experience is important because there are things that people cannot learn from books. Present things that the 5 senses detect cannot be accurately described in written form. And that is why it is imperative to experience certain things in order to fully understand them. For example, if my brother tells me that the burgers at Burger King, kasi I read from a book. A book tells me that burgers from Burger King, sorry if I'm making you guys hungry, taste good. I will not be able to fully appreciate that fact, since taste can only be experienced by actually eating the food. Due to this, buying a Burger King burger and eating it is the only way for me to truly comprehend its value. In conclusion, so when you're writing your conclusion, ideally you're summarizing the ideas presented in your body paragraphs, and then you're going to give your opinion for this one. But here's the catch, guys. So far, if I look at my essay, I only have 224 words here. But since I still have 24 minutes left, I can freely, like I think you can see it, 24 minutes, right? I have 24 minutes left. I can still add stuff here. No biggie. And that's again the beauty of not overthinking your words and your ideas. Just write whatever you feel like writing. You can add and edit stuff later. The Toefl is a computer-based exam. You have all the freedom in the world to add and omit words later. The important thing is you were able to respond to the question. Modifying it to meet the requirements of the test becomes easier once you have the fundamentals down. All right. So let's say I can have another idea here. So another advantage of reading from books. Okay. So in addition, right, books spend countless of hours studying the topic of their let's say a lot of authors as far as studying the topic of their book, which is information for example, nurses rely on nursing books to learn the fundamentals of their craft. They do not need to get experience right away, since the books help them learn or help them get information about the basics of effectiveness. There we go. I got 287 words. Then let's just give another idea for this other opposing view. Let's use more over here. Over. Learn more experiences. For instance, learn to understand what kind of people I should be friends with after experiencing, after interacting with individuals different walks of life. This is something I will not be able to learn if I learn from. All right, so now we go to the conclusion. So 2 ideas for each paragraph. Okay, first one, books contain accurate information. Books are a safe way to learn. Okay, in conclusion, learn using books to get information is a safe way to learn, and it contains reliable information since the writers spent a lot of time doing research on the topic of their books. However, there are things that can only be learned through experience. In my opinion, both are important. All right. So, still have 20 minutes left, guys. So, that means in 10 minutes, we were able to finish our essay. Now, what we normally do is to improve it. So, remember that technique. It works both for the Ielts and the Toefl IBT. Your objective is to always finish your output and make it better later. So, let's study the introduction first. We were able to paraphrase the first sentence. We were able to paraphrase the second sentence. We only replaced words that we can easily replace. Some people will say, hey, you're repeating a lot of words. And to that, I say, as an IELTS test taker, that's your problem. But for TOEFL test takers, this is not a problem. Okay? At the end of the day, with the TOEFL, the priority is to express yourself clearly and to make sure that the person reading your work understands what you're saying. Vocabulary becomes secondary to clarity. And even with the IELTS, I am a proponent of prioritizing clarity, because even if you use different words, but you're not using them correctly, then you pretty much messed up. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't expand your vocabulary. I did offer advice on how to effectively expand your vocabulary during the earlier parts of this lecture. But we cannot forget that when it comes to using words, we cannot simply replace words just for the sake of replacing them. Precision is still something that examiners, both in the TOEFL and the IELTS, are looking at. Precision is important. You have to accurately use your words. Just because you're using different words doesn't mean you're going to get a good score. Between the two, which is the lesser evil, using the same words over and over again, but expressing yourself clearly, or using different words, but you are misunderstood by your examiner, I go with this one, clarity. But again, I am not saying that you shouldn't expand your vocabulary. If you can, please do so. So again, I simply replaced words that I can easily replace. So instead of using the word knowledge here, I use the word learning. And then look at this final sentence, guys. This one that I am highlighting right now. This is the kind of sentence that is not recommended in the IELTS, but you can get away with that in the TOEFL. See, thanks to this sentence, I am able to reach 300 words faster. This is the kind of sentence that we do not encourage in the IELTS, simply because it really rubs some examiners the wrong way. Okay? Now notice the cohesive device I have here on the one hand. So this indicates that, hey, this is the first view. Getting information from books is a safe way to learn. That is my argument. How do you support your argument? With a reason. Normally, when you're giving a reason for your argument, you're answering the question why or how. But you can also ask yourself this: what makes my argument valid? So, why? Why is it a safer way to learn from books? The writers of these materials have already gone through painstaking experiences to prove their theories, saving the readers from the dangers of testing out these theories themselves. So basically, I answered the question why. Why is it safer to learn through books? And this sentence pretty much does that for me. It explains that. It's my reason. So now I have two important elements here. And then I have an example here. For example, a book about toxic chemicals will tell the reader that drinking muriatic acid will have negative effects to one's health and can lead to death. So that's my example. An example of a dangerous experience that I don't have to go through because somebody else already conducted research on that. So in order to elaborate that further, after your example, ask yourself, so what? So what about your example? Why is it essential to your essay? So what? Because of this, the reader will not even try to ingest this substance since the book has already provided information about the dangers of doing this. There you go. So those first 4 sentences allow you to effectively defend what you are saying. Now, I needed to add a few more words there just to make sure that I will be writing more than 300 words. So what I did was I simply added new information and I just gave an example. That's it. So whereas in the Ielts, there's too many mental gymnastics going on. You're thinking about different ways to expertly follow that structure of argument, reason, example, support. Whereas in the Toefl, it's just pretty much all about you expressing yourself clearly. The guidelines, the structures, they help you write faster. They help you meet the requirements of the test. But at the end of the day, there are no clear rules when it comes to how you should write your essay. The important thing is, were you able to answer the question? Were you able to support it? Were you able to finish your work on time? And is the reader able to understand what you're saying? So my next idea here is, in addition, a lot of authors spend countless of hours studying the topic of their book, which makes information accurate. Okay, so can you give me an example of that? For example, nurses rely on nursing books to learn about the fundamentals of their craft. They do not need to get experience right away since the books help them get information about the basics of being an effective nurse. So there you go. The writers of the books provided you with accurate info. If I were to rephrase this, because I did not really highlight the importance of the writer, maybe what I would say is, let's just add this, which were written by experts. There you go. Just adding that helps me put it in the right direction where I'm highlighting the importance of the writer, and of course the writer produced the book. So there you go. Then for my next paragraph, notice how long this paragraph is. This first one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines. Next paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so this is good because the difference is only 1 line. So it's like in the IELTS, if the disparity is just 1 line, then they're equally developed. I did not mean to develop them equally. Okay, this is maybe my IELTS background that's just automatically doing that. Okay, because when I write, I use my instinct. I don't really think about it that much. So maybe it's my IELTS background that made them like equally developed. But I wanted to really show you that it's okay if they're not equally developed. If you have 10 lines in the first body paragraph and just 7 lines in the other one, it's totally fine. Whereas in the IELTS, it can be a problem. So now let's look at the next cohesive device. So we're contradicting our previous paragraph. And to do that, one cohesive device that you want to use is on the other hand. So on the other hand, learning from experience is important because there are things that people cannot learn from books. Okay, what makes this argument valid? Why? What are these things that we cannot learn from books? Things that the 5 senses can detect cannot be accurately described in written form. And that is why it is imperative to experience certain things in order to fully understand them. Now, the problem is I am using the word things a lot, but I still have 13 minutes left. So let's see how I can paraphrase this. There are things that people cannot learn from books. So let's say the sensations that the 5 senses detect cannot be accurately described in written form, and that is why it's imperative to experience certain So this one, I'm a little bit stuck here with things, but what I do know is since I'm not using them consecutively, I think this is a good thing for me. And on top of that, well, again, I'd rather repeat a word and be clear than to paraphrase it and be unclear. So I'll leave it at that. Examiners won't think of it as a big problem in the TOEFL. For example, if a book tells me that burgers from Burger King taste good, that's plural, so good subject-verb agreement relationship there. I will not be able to fully appreciate the fact. So there's a typo here. No, that's right. The fact. Yeah. Yeah, I think this was good the first time around. Not really much to edit anymore. I'm just double checking. Yep. So there are words here that are repeated, but at the end of the day, the examiners will look at the context of it. Like, you can only use so many synonyms at the end of the day. So yeah, this kind of output can easily get a 4 or a 4.5 in the TOEFL. All right. So when it comes to your conclusion, again, what matters is you summarized all the parts of your task description. Not really all the parts, but more like the major ideas from your body paragraphs. That will be the first sentence of your conclusion. And then your last sentence for discuss both views, you give your opinion. But in this case, I gave 3 sentences because I was trying to meet the word limit. So there you go. We were able to develop our ideas. We were able to support them. We were able to write the sufficient number of words. So that will get us a 4 or 4.5. All right. So that concludes our discussion on independent writing. So to summarize, when it comes to the differences between the two, for the IELTS writing section, it's really important for you to quickly identify important ideas in your task description for writing task 1. Also in writing task 1, you need to be able to accurately compare figures. So that means you have to do some basic mathematical operation. And then for IELTS writing, you have more time to complete your essay for writing task 2. And you only need to write just 250 words. In writing task 2, you have to be careful with your examples. You cannot just use first person pronouns. You cannot use personal examples all the time. Also in the IELTS, you have to develop your paragraphs equally. And as I've stated earlier, remarking in the IELTS, you have a better chance of getting a better score there compared to score review in the TOEFL. By the way, it's also worth pointing out that in the TOEFL, when you apply for score review, your score might become lower. So that's a problem. So let's say you already got 25 in writing, then you applied for score review, it can become 24. Whereas in the IELTS, it will either stay the same or go up. Now, for TOEFL writing, all you have to do is just summarize what you read and heard in the integrated task. There's less time to complete the independent task, and it requires more words than writing task 2. But you are okay with sticking to personal examples, and you don't need to develop your paragraphs equally. And I hope this doesn't happen to you. And should you find yourself in the situation where you get a low score in one part of the exam, ETS has what they call my best scores. So what they do is they combine your best scores from each section of all your valid TOEFL tests. So let's take this as an example. So this person took the test on October 19. This person got 22 in reading, 22 in listening, 21 in speaking, 18 in writing. What ETS did was get this person's best scores from all valid versions of the test. So the score for reading was retained, but what ETS did was, okay, this person performed well during the March 10 exam. Let's use that score instead. Okay, so 23 in listening. The score for speaking remained the same. Okay, this person had a higher score on June 2. Let's use that score instead. So that's what my best scores does. ETS automatically combines your best scores from every valid version of the test. But not all employers, not all institutions, not all organizations accept my best scores. So before you consider using it, ask your employer, your organization, your agency, or your institution first if they accept my best scores. Because in some cases, you need to really retake the test, like all 4 parts of the exam, you have to go through them again. And in some cases, again, you can use my best scores. So my personal experience with the TOEFL and the IELTS. So I took the IELTS on April 30, 2015. I got a 7 in writing, okay? Kind of makes you wonder, he can write that fast, but he only got 7, no? But in the TOEFL, I got 28. Now, let's look at the conversion. So in the TOEFL, if you get 28 in writing, in the IELTS, that's only equivalent to 7. Now, imagine that, guys. 2 points away from a perfect score, and according to IELTS standards, that's just a 7. See? So this goes to show how high the standards of the IELTS are, right? Because if you look at this particular conversion table, even if you get 29, which common sense would dictate that, hey, I should be getting 8.5. That's just 1 point away from the perfect score. No, according to the IELTS, if you scored 29 in your TOEFL writing exam, you're just equivalent to 7.5 in the Ielts. See? That's how high the standards of the Ielts are. So keep that in mind. Very high standards in the Ielts when it comes to writing. All right. This table, by the way, is from ETS, the maker of the TOEFL exam. All right. So regardless, if you're already converting to TOEFLism, okay, good for you. Welcome to the Church of TOEFLism. Whether you're taking the Ielts or the TOEFL, it's really going to be difficult unless you prepare for the test. It doesn't really matter what test you take. If you don't prepare, then you're going to struggle. So if you need help preparing for your Ielts or your TOEFL exam, guys, we are here for you. So at 9.09er, we have an Ielts Unlimited Review package. So that costs 4,000 pesos. It's valid for 1 year. That entitles you to unlimited one-on-one coaching for 1 year. You also have access to all our materials, our recorded lectures, and of course, because you are our student, if you're our student, then you can attend our live lectures. You get to talk to the likes of Sir Brian Choson, Brainy Brian, who got a perfect score in all parts of the exam. You get to talk to Sir Irvin Temporal, the IELTS guru, perfect score in speaking, perfect score in reading and listening, an 8 in writing. You can also get to speak to Philip Aitona, the legendary Niner, because he also got the same scores as Sir Irvin, and he also happens to be our OET expert. So Sir Philip got near perfect scores in the OET as well. So as you can see, guys, at Niner, we got you covered. Whether you're taking the IELTS, the TOEFL, the PTE, the OET, the CELPIP, we have experts who can help you. So what about the TOEFL? Of course, you have me. I got 28 in writing. I'll tell you what to do. I'll help you. I'll give you templates to get a good score in your writing exam. Our TOEFL Unlimited Review package will set you back by 3,500 pesos. Similar to the IELTS, you're entitled to 1 year of unlimited coaching and you get access to our materials and lectures. If you're undecided, consider our buy one take 10 promo. It will give you access to all our test preparation programs for the price of 6,000. And again, apart from that, you also get access to our other videos and our other materials for OSCE. We have CBT, we have Prometric, we have visa processing. Just to be clear, let me look up our website for the specifics of that particular package. But yeah, at Niner, we are more than happy to help you with all the things that will allow you to make your dream come true. So to be specific, the buy one take 10 package also includes, visa consultation and NCLEX. Wow, look at that. Visa consultation and NCLEX. Wow, nice. So to clarify, you have IELTS, OET, PTE, CELPIP, TOEFL, and then you have NCLEX, you have UK CBT, you have UK OSCE, you have visa processing and visa consultation. Okay, so those are the 10 things included. Okay, I think I made the mistake of saying Prometric there, so my bad. So those are the 10 things included. At Niner, we are using a very innovative technology. It's our 9.09er dashboard. This is perfect for healthcare workers because we know that you guys are very busy and you cannot study at a fixed timetable. So with our dashboard, you'll be able to study anytime, anywhere, whether you're in the Philippines or whether you're outside the Philippines. And our dashboard is compatible with desktop and mobile devices. And plus, we're giving you access to authentic practice materials, whether it's the IELTS, the OET, the TOEFL, the PTE. So this is what the dashboard looks like. But to help you better understand how it works, I'm going to demonstrate it to you guys. I'm going to share my screen with you. So this is the 9.09er dashboard. So this will give you access to all the goodies at 9.09er. So I'm a lecturer, that's why I have access to all of these, but you only get access to what you paid for. So let's say you just paid for the TOEFL Unlimited Review package. So this is how it works. You click on that, and then you have your menu to the left or to your left, and this is where you have access to all our materials. You have our recorded lectures, our handouts, we have practice tools, we have bonus lessons, we have additional practice tests. We even have grammar classes, of course. We have vocabulary classes as well, which will certainly help you get a good score in your exam. All right. So again, I do hope that we will be able to help you out. If you need assistance with your test preparation, again, you have 9.09er here to help you with all your test preparation needs. So how do you get 7 or higher in the Ielts writing section? How do you get 27 or higher in the Toefl writing section? My general advice is you have to practice paraphrasing. Whether you're taking the Toefl or the Ielts, at the end of the day, you need to paraphrase. Because in writing task 2 of the Ielts, you have to paraphrase. In the independent task of the Toefl, you have to paraphrase. In the integrated writing task, you will not be able to remember all the words used in the passage and the recording, so you have to use your own words in expressing the ideas conveyed in your sources. So that's number 1, practice paraphrasing. How do I do that, sir? My guess is you can read an article online and then try to write it. Rewrite it on a piece of paper, rewrite it on Microsoft Word using your own words. Without memorizing, without reading it again, try to write whatever you remember from what you read. So this is one way of helping you develop your paraphrasing skills. And then I think I mentioned this already, expand your vocabulary by checking your essays for words that you use a lot. So look for the synonyms of these words that you use frequently. Speaking of frequently, you also want to practice writing frequently. I did not get to the level of being able to finish an essay in 5 minutes or 10 minutes by just practicing in one day. You have to do it every day, guys, as much as possible, especially if your weakness is writing. Try to spend a lot of time writing. I know that you guys are busy and you're probably going to say, well, I'm too tired to write. But guys, remember, in the Ielts, writing is the final section. In the Toefl, writing is the final section. When you're tired, that's the best time to write because you're not getting to the writing section fresh. You're getting there tired. So if I were you, use that to your advantage. Turn your problems into opportunities. That's how you can get a good score in whatever exam you're planning to take. And if you cannot do 2 tasks in one day, then just do 1 task. But sir, even 1 task is difficult for me to finish. Then probably write half the essay. Write half of the essay. Why? I've heard somewhere that if you're going to do something, it's better to do it poorly than to not do it at all. So it's very similar to the advice that I got from my supervisor when I was working at Asian Development Bank. He told me that 1 will always be greater than 0. So my takeaway from that is it's always much better to do a little bit of something than to not do it at all. Practicing, preparing for your test, even though you just spend 10 minutes on it, 5 minutes on it, 30 minutes on it, it's much better than not preparing at all. Until you find time to do the entire test on your own, until you find time to simulate the exam at your own convenience. All right? It's much better to do something than to not do anything at all. When it comes to both the Toefl and the Ielts, you can always read the passage, like I said, and write an essay about it. Get guidance also. So the problem with some people, when they're asked to study on their own, they end up stumbling into wrong answers. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people succeed by self-studying. Okay, I'm not going to force you to enroll to Niner. If you firmly believe that you can do this on your own, by all means do so. But for those who are a little bit lost, for those who need structure, for those who are clueless when it comes to where do I start, you need guidance, guys, because you can search the internet all you want for all the answers, but you're on your own and there's no way of finding out whether the answer you saw is right or wrong. Get help from experts. But the most important advice I can give you is to pray. So I'm a Christian and I believe that if you align your plans with God's plans, you will succeed. All right. With that, thank you very much for attending this lecture about the difference between the Ielts and the Toefl writing section. So some shout outs. I have Pexels to thank for my pictures. For my references, I have Ielts, of course, the official website of the Ielts, ielts.org. I have ets.org, official website of the maker of the Toefl. I also use the official guide to the Toefl test 6th and 4th edition for this presentation. So if you guys want to find me, you want me to help you out, you can find me at 9.09er official on Facebook. You can also go to Toefl Philippines, our study group, and of course, my Facebook account, known.viardo.73. All right. Thank you so much, IFNG. Thank you, admin. Thank you, viewers. If anybody has a question, feel free to type it in chat. Anybody?
Type in your questions, guys. Don't be shy.
Don't worry, I don't bite. Even if I do, I cannot do it because I am physically away from you. But again, I don't.
How about
I
on
hope you did.
Facebook?
Let's see. Do
Sorry,
we have questions
YouTube.
on Facebook? Let's see.
Any
Let's
questions,
check.
guys? Don't be shy. Sir Lone is
Uh,
here.
But again, maybe some of them forgot to ask questions or they forgot some of the questions they want to ask. It's okay. If you suddenly think of a question, if you suddenly remember what you wanted to ask me, again, all my contact details are on the screen. You can always visit the official Facebook page of Niner. And if you're having a hard time reaching out to me, if you're having a hard time finding me, our staff at Niner will be more than happy to connect you to me. All right.
Okay, so I think there's no question, but guys, as Sir Lone just said a while ago, you may message him on the links that he provided. So with that, Sir Lone, thank you very much. So we are looking forward for your next lecture about reading.
Yep.
And I think most of us will convert to Toeflism because if you
It's your
are looking for
religion.
disciples, we're here. Okay, so thank you.